think I'm pretty good because when I sing at church, everybody stares at me. So I
Oh,
think I
I'm
must
sure
be
they
pretty
do.
good.
Well, I'd like to see that show. I bet the rafters are creaking.
My daughter punches me because she says, "You're singing too loud, Dad."
You're supposed to, it's the joy.
Well, I'm trying to figure out why. That's all right. They can hear me.
Right, that's what I'm testing right now. And I've got the stream on my phone. I don't hear,
You don't hear anything?
I don't hear anything.
Oh, here we go. We're gonna start this again.
Hey, it's just on a little bit of a lag is all. All right, we're good.
Max or?
You're good.
I see the white line.
All right, minutes to approve for March.
Make motion to approve the minutes for March.
Tim, can I have a second? Mike? All in favor?
Aye. We have enough people here to,
We have four. Forum.
who's missing? Who do I got?
The ones that are still in caucus, and you know what? I'm not gonna sit and wait for them to
Okay, no, I just want to make sure
5:30.
if we're voting that we,
Max has told them that we're ready, so.
okay.
All right, Janine, is Janine with us? I don't think she's online either. So,
If she gets on, we can go back to her.
yeah, we can go back to her.
Sorry.
Yes.
I have nothing to add to my written report.
Has anybody got anything for Kyle for his report here? Come on, Jim, don't disappoint us.
No, I'm Bayside Grocery, good. Want to make sure I'm getting my deli sandwiches are, they're not cheating me on the meat.
Are we having any more than unusual issues with scales being off, or, you might?
Now, the biggest thing that's going on is they're changing from the regular checkouts to the self-checkouts at all the stores. They're adding more to self-checkouts,
Oh, yeah,
but everything else seems to be normal.
I'm assuming those definitely have to be checked, right?
Yes.
Self ones.
They call me as soon as they put them in where they are real quick.
The which ones were they?
Self checkouts.
Oh, self.
Everything's going to self checkout.
Yeah.
How often do they have to be checked? Just out of curiosity.
Once a year,
Once a year?
unless they notice something, they call me, or if we get a complaint from a customer.
Okay.
So when you say they notice something, you mean the store itself says, hey, something doesn't seem right with my scale, and you can
Yeah.
help them with that?
Yeah,
That's-
well, they have somebody come in and repair it, then I come in and verify it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
If we can, if it's a quick fix, we'll do
They
that.
kick you up? Okay.
I hate being late, so like sitting in there for an extra 5 minutes was like calling to me.
All right. Anybody else got any questions for Kyle?
No, I see that the Bayside grocery store favored the customers. Their scale was off in favor of the customers. But we can't fix it. What the heck's that all about?
Sorry about that.
All right, Gary Duckett, buildings and grounds, parks and trails.
Okay, we have my report. I've got just a couple of things I'll call your attention to, maybe add on a little bit. Ben Carr and I reviewed the proposals from 8 firms that responded to RFP 2022-03 for an architect to provide architectural and engineering services such as develop specifications for the hardboard roof, public safety building roofing project. The architect will also be needed for some other projects listed on the buildings and grounds request, the capital plan. And I agree by selecting Bergman, and the resolution will be on the agenda later for your consideration. I'll answer any questions at that time as opposed to jumping in now if you want. Item 7 on the agenda here on the start here, Heritage Masonry did start on the repair to the masonry at the historic post office. No big surprise. They are finding some other problems with the building that I'll probably have an architect take a look at once we selected an architect for that purpose. Under new business, I just want to call your attention to the fact we received a letter or an email. There's a building nearby to the mental health building that's for sale. It would add 9 parking slots right now, which isn't a lot, but at least it's some parking for that building. Unless we knock the building that was on it down. I'll leave that to the chair, and the attorneys to look at. I know they received a copy of that letter, but I just want to call it to the attention of Public Works. One serious problem we got with that building is there's no parking for that building. And as you probably know, the hospital is selling the parking lot on the south side of the building where a lot of the people that did park. So that's not going to be available to them, I don't think, in the future. So that's an issue that we will try to address one way or the other.
So just on that point, I mean, I'm assuming the parking goes with the building.
The building that's for sale is across the street from the mental health building, and that it's there's one lot, there's 9 parking spots already there. There's a structure that it could be theoretically taken down for more parking if we wanted to. The other option is to talk to the hospital about a vacant lot where we took the buildings down for the mental health building some years ago. The hospital does have some land that we could acquire for parking for us. Also, just so those of you that don't know, the parking lot that we're using now belongs to the hospital also. It's not we don't own it. We don't own a single parking spot there. Well, I shouldn't say that. We do own a couple parking spots there. But the rest of it is at the mercy of the hospital or not at all. So it's just a source of concern that I've had for some time. Other than that, I've got 2 resolutions for later on the agenda, but I'll answer any questions that you may have.
I got any questions for Gary?
I do, well,
Jim?
you said you got about a dozen proposals?
For the architects,
Yeah.
we received 8.
8. Wow. They're looking for work. So we can talk, since we have contract offline about.
Okay.
For this meeting.
Thank you.
All right, Doug?
Yeah, thank you. My report is included in there. As I look at it, I do want to point out that under area updates, they were all numbered. So it looks like 1 and 3 have nothing after them, but it's actually the line below them. So Global Island redevelopment, phasing documentation is being updated to seek private and public funding. So those are just, that's just a formatting error as I look at it right here. So the Friends of Emerson Park, there isn't actually a blank after it. 4, 5, and 6 are all of there. So
I think it's right on the paper.
So this actually goes with that.
Oh,
That's why,
okay.
so I just, if you looked at that and thought there were some blanks, they actually are related if you just read through the lines there, so. I don't have any additional updates to that, although we'll have some resolutions to talk about afterwards, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Would you want to just update the phone call that you gave me about the trail?
On the bridge, that's the first resolution. We're gonna go through it.
Well, Okay, we can do it.
We can do it
then.
then, I'm just gonna
Okay.
do it then,
Yep.
yeah, yep.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I got a question. First of all, I want to thank you, Doug, for, I called Doug on a couple of complaints that people had with garbage along the trails, and
Oh, sure.
Doug took care of it really quick. But can you explain to everybody here what the Friends of Emerson Park, exactly what they are?
Sure, we were approached by some citizens last year, just asked how they could assist with the park programming or just in general, if there was stuff they could do. Kind of, for example, with the trail cleanup that we did. So we had a group of organization speak to some of our friends at Sterling Nature Center, which has been a very successful group, both at fundraising and supporting the Nature Center. Gave them a little bit of guidance and they went out and set up a 501c3 organization that's there to support the park, both from a logistics standpoint and also from a fundraising standpoint. So they're currently involved in a couple of park cleanups throughout the year. They're going to do an annual gala where they raise funds and help go through a list of projects that they've identified, but also projects that the park has identified as far as fundraising opportunities. And, for example, they're putting on the Easter egg hunt that's coming up this weekend.
I've met with them. They're a nice group of people. They really are. And they really want to make that park look good. And they're working hand in hand with you on different things, right?
They do, and we're happy for the help.
Great. Thank you.
Anybody for Doug? No? All right, thanks, Doug.
Thanks.
Ryan?
I'd just like to add that we did start paving yesterday on Silver Street. That's going obviously due to the weather. Today we didn't get started on Oak Hill like we wanted to, but hopefully tomorrow we'll have better weather. And on the snowplow contracts, we're there, I think. Tomorrow's the last day if they got any to get back to me on it, if they have any questions or concerns that they want to address. And then I'll have a resolution for next month for the plow contracts, and then we'll pass it on to the town's boards and see what they have to say about it, see where we're at.
Oh, what'd we end up with, time material?
It's a per trip average time and material base. They brought their alternative back to me and I made it work and fit. So we're going in the right direction. I'd really like to get to the straight up time and material off actual cost, but this is a step in the right direction.
Give us a baseline for the future.
Yes.
Good job, Brian.
Anybody else got anything for Ryan?
Two things real quick, Brian. Yeah, you said you started paving. What asphalt plant are we working on?
Depends on which road we're talking about.
Let me
Use multiple
phrase it
letters.
differently. Well, I guess I was at a meeting the other day and someone said that the asphalt plants weren't opened up yet. I talked to Roselli, they were opening the 25th only because they have a broken belt for part. Just curious what ones you're using.
We use soup coat out of Polkville. Where the material comes from, and then Seneca Stone out of, I guess you'd call that Seneca Falls,
Okay.
or Hanson's out of Skinny Atlas, depending on which project it is.
And all three of those are open.
Yes. Barrett's is open as well.
It, sometime, probably not for the public, I'll catch up with on the plumbing contract stuff.
Okay.
I'd like to know the breakdowns, probably detail it.
The next month's resolution, you'll see it,
Okay,
but I can give it to you anytime.
yeah. All right, thanks.
And I'll assume with the paving that you'll be on top of things more than we have been in the past, because you know how I feel about one of the companies you just discussed because of the road up in my district. That's crap.
Yes.
And that
The road or is the lines?
he will be, taxpayers will be paying for to do again, right?
Eventually, yes.
And the company, I rode up and down the road with two representatives from that company who told me what a wonderful redo job they were gonna do. Person sitting in your seat previously didn't really follow up on that, so neither did the company. So I hold the company and the county at fault for that, so.
We have a foreman that's on the jobs. We don't just let the turnkey jobs go by them.
Again, anybody that wants to drive up on a bridge road and feel the wonderful washboard, go for it. So. Anybody else for Brian? All right, so. I'm assuming Janine never came on line either, right?
Should be right there.
No. Well, I guess we're not gonna go back to Janine. Anybody that's got any questions for Janine? Well, we'll have to contact Janine. But she's not here. So I guess we'll go to resolutions. Gary.
Okay, PW1, authorizing an agreement with Bergman Architects, Engineers, Planners to create plans, designs, and specifications for a variety of county projects.
I have a motion. Hans, can I have a second?
Clark, I'll second.
Okay. Discussion.
Yes, Chair.
Then you.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure this doesn't tie our hands in any way with, say, the county office building project or so, to use these guys specifically on, we can pick and choose what projects we utilize these guys on, or?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the county can, for any individual, any specific project, can go out and do our normal bidding procedure, but ask for 3 bids on that project and do it any way we want. This is for the big variety of small projects. And I say small, but they're gonna add up to quite a bit of money over time, because you're talking $20,000, $30,000 project here and there. Yeah, but we're not locked in to this forever. And it's actually for a 1 year, just to make sure that everybody's happy before we potentially renew for another year or 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that
Jim.
answers sort of, so it's a 1 year contract with up to 3 1 year extensions.
Yes.
And I guess unless I missed something, how do we, maybe this is it here. These are all their rates, their table rates that they're gonna use per hour.
Per hour, right.
So what we don't have is any kind of comparison to what if there was 8 people bidding. And I understand for engineering services, you don't always have to take the low bidder, but if to kind of bounce off of what Trish said too. I'm just kind of guess how did we zero down on Bergman?
I did provide a sheet that I can send to all the legislators of an analysis of this. But I give you kind of a quick overview.
Please.
There were 8 bidders. I'll just go in alphabetical order here. Barton and Judas did give us an hourly rate. Their hourly rates were higher. Okay. Beardsley Design did not choose to give an hourly rate. Bella Spina Architects did not choose to give a price. Bergman gave what Don and I reviewed to be the best prices, which are what are listed on that sheet. Hunt EAS also gave us pricing. Theirs were competitive with Bergman to some degree, but overall Bergman was better. And if we want to go into executive session, I could talk a little bit about some of the interviews I had with people about different companies. But I really would rather not do that here, just because.
Understood.
And there's this EOPLI Design Group. Their rates were significantly higher per hour. CNS Architects gave no price. And Wendell Architecture chose to give us two prices, a high price and a low price. The low price was better, but the high price was way higher. So Don and I reviewed that and said, we're not gonna.
So if you don't take us, we'll go to here.
Yeah. So that's how we arrived at the pricing, but I'll actually send this to all legislators so you guys can look at it. I will encourage you if you'd like. Don has all the original proposals. If you want to review them, have at it.
Have we used Bergman in the past, Gary?
We are currently, the planning department's using Bergman right now for working with the city on a project in some park in the city. I have not specifically used them before, no, but the county, they were already a vendor, and the planning department was happy with the services that they've had from them. So I've used some of the other architects. I was happy with Wendell, Beardsley, any of these guys, but again, I'm going to try to go with the best value to the taxpayer. So I'm trying to do anyway.
We would expect nothing less.
That's it. That's right.
Any other questions for Gary?
Not for Gary, but before we vote, Trish, are you comfortable with the response you heard? Or would you like to go into executive session to see
No.
the other information?
I guess just a comment that the planning department used to have an engineer on staff. I know soil and water contracts out a lot for engineering services. I don't know how much the county contracts out for engineering services. But the city also has a lot of engineers on staff. So I don't know if we've ever explored shared services with the city. Not to stop what we're doing here, but just something that I think there might be potential there. I don't know, not that I've had any conversations either, but something that I always thought should be explored.
Well, did you?
Anything could be explored at any time. I kind of want to go this route because I want to know who I call when I have a problem, like the problem I just had at the historic post office. I want to be able to call an architect in without trying to figure out who I should call first. And that's why I'm trying to do this. I talked to Don about any piggybackable type things, and there weren't any that he was aware of. So that's why we went this route. This way we're satisfying completely our purchasing policy and haven't had. In fact, Don, I think, said to me something about some of these types of things you can't piggyback on for some reason. And I don't know the purchasing ramifications, but I want to satisfy the purchasing requirements. Again, Doug's got some projects that we might utilize this for. It's just going to make it so that when we have a project, we can hit the ground running on it instead of going through another 3-month hassle.
But didn't you just say that this company, the planning department worked with these companies with the city?
Yes,
Obviously.
with the city, yes.
The city's obviously using them too.
Yeah, the city has used them before, I know that, because they're tied in together right now in some project in a park in town here. I think it's over where the Kellett building used to be, something to do with that area. You probably know, Trish, I don't follow it, but. Okay.
Jim?
So I'm assuming they have a local office.
The Rochester's and the offices in Rochester.
That's their closest office.
Yes.
Okay. Don't have them stay overnight.
No, I won't.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, DW2.
Okay. PW2 is authorized the buildings and grounds department to hire a part-time building maintenance mechanic to replace a part-time building maintenance mechanic who resigned.
Motion.
Move it. Second.
Second, Jim. Any questions? Discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, highway. Thank you.
EW3 is our Bridge New York, establishing the capital H. All of them.
I'll do one at a time. All right, EW3, motion.
Move it. Blackout.
Tina, second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, PW4.
EW4 is, we have a retirement. I need to fill that position.
Have a motion. First and second,
Blackout.
discussion. Not all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, PW5.
PW5 is are entering into our contract for our DOT mandated testing.
Motion. Hans, can I have a second?
Second.
Jim, any discussion? Is this the same company every year?
This is the same company we started with last year, yes. We did a 1-year agreement to give us a trial run, and then we went with this one, same company.
Is it something that you have to put out every few years to different companies or not? Or just-
We had to put it out because we had lack of service when I got here from our current company. So we looked for no one.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? EW6.
PW6 is entering into the yearly mowing contracts with the town.
Motion. Hans, can I have a second? Any discussion?
Just yes, but is this, I may have missed it. Is this, did this go up from prior year?
We added a CPI increase on it of 7.5% to cover the fuel costs from last year. And everybody agreed to it.
Anybody else? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thanks, Brian. Doug?
Mr. Chair, can I ask him a question?
Yes.
Brian, the rumor out there is we're losing both of our mechanics this year. Is that a true rumor? And what are we doing about it if we are?
When you say mechanics, are we talking about highway or we talking motor pool?
Motor pool.
There's a rumor that one of them's retiring in midsummer and the other one's gonna retire shortly after the first of the year.
What are you doing anything about? How will you want to replace them?
If we continue the process of consolidation, we need to look into either consolidating the rest of it with the city or putting an RFP out to privatize it, or we can talk numbers if you'd like at some point.
That's fine. I just wanted to know if there was a plan and,
Yes, nobody's confirmed that they're retiring yet.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
PW7 is to authorize the second modification of the Cayuga Bruce Trail Bridge A project. For those of you who might not be aware, we applied for a grant in 2019 and received one from the New York State RTP program, which is a regional trails program. The original budget was $113,000. They actually sent us a grant award, which we did another resolution for, which raised it, the whole budget to $119,000. So that was 2019 numbers, and we all know what happened between 2019 and now. We bid out the bridge, just the bridge project, just the bridge portion of it, and that came back about $25,000 in excess of what 2019 estimated number was. So to close this bridge project and to put this trail bridge in on the Cato Brutus Trail, the resolution is asking for $25,000 to be transferred into the capital H fund to complete this bridge project. I had a brief conversation with Mr. Dennison prior to putting the resolution in. We had a conversation about the budget grant amount was $119,000. But the actual total budget, because the grant from the state and the RTP program really only pays physically for the bridge, the abutments in the area directly associated with the bridge. We actually have to continue, or if you will, improve the access to the entire site. So we actually have in the budget, in the Parks and Trails budget this year, approximately $70,000 between two different lines that will actually do all of that trail work to get to the site. Obviously, our concern is the bridge will be more expensive next year. And we haven't seen any, slowdown in the price increases or in the year-to-year increases that I would expect to see next year. The total project cost being about $200,000 between the county funding and the grant puts us in the range where we try to be at about 25% of the entire budget being funded by the county. So we're still in that margin for what we tend to try to go forward with a lot of our park projects. We're very successful with Sterling Nature Center and a lot of the other trail projects. So we're still within that number that historically has been very successful for us. And this is the last bridge in that section that goes all the way from Ditmar Road and Brutus all the way to connect to Cato. We already own the entire right of way that's there. We just can't close the end of it without obviously either giving everybody boats or putting the bridge in when they get to that location. So.
And the other two bridges are done.
Yep.
So if we don't do this, we've wasted a lot of money and time.
Correct. We
Two out of three
installed one,
bridges in.
and the county the county budgeted for installed one of the bridges last year. And the first of the series was installed in 2018. That was with another RTP grant that actually came. I think it was 80-20 grant this year. Sorry. That's what's in front of us.
So can I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Chris, second.
Second
Jim, all right, discussion.
question, Chair. So I understand the resolution, but then you said you needed $25,000 more. And am I not reading that in here, or is it there? Where?
So the actual
Understanding the numbers.
So sure, in the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth whereas shows the delta. So we got a bridge fabrication quote from Contech Engineering. It exceeded the original estimate by $25,000. So what we had in the original budget is $25,000 more for just the bridge itself, just the bridge fabrication. That's where the big change in our budget came from as far as the granted amount. So that's the number in the whereas, and so therefore down in the resolved, the first resolve lists that $25,000 request to be transferred from a contingency fund to the capital H, which is already established to fund and close the grant project for Bridge A.
It sort of catches me up. Is there, and again, this is a small amount in the contingency fund. Is there a reason we couldn't use ARPA funds for this?
I just had a conversation with the budget director and she suggested that was the location to take it from. I can't really speak for her.
Right. I guess I'm asking the committee. We can make those decisions.
I'm sure this falls under ARPA.
Parks and Trails. I'm just wondering, it's a one-time expenditure. We always talk about that. It's a small amount.
What's everybody else think?
Probably come out of ARPA.
I mean,
I guess I would propose that we look at that as part of the approval of this, is that is an option.
so I'll ask our attorney that's here, can we pass this and still change where the money comes from?
You could amend it at Ways and Means.
Okay, so we
You
have,
could pass it today, and then when it hits Ways and Means, we can make an amendment once we finalize with Lynn if it can come out of ARPA.
well, we can do that and just pitch it one more time for ARPA or whatever. If they say no, then so be it.
I'm for the project. I'm just saying that's, we talk about that money being used for one-time expenditures. This bridge will be here a long time, I'm sure. Contingency might be for an emergency.
Anybody else?
That's just my opinion.
Kenny? The only thing I could suggest is each side take it back to their caucus and discuss it. And as long as the majority of the caucus, we can put it as a resolution, separate resolution, right? Or do you want to leave it as is and then amend it?
We could just leave it as
Okay,
amended.
and then amend it.
Amend it, yes, correct.
For the record, I want it to be part of the discussion.
It's a 2/3.
Ways and means.
Yes.
Pardon you?
I want it to be part of the discussion in Ways and Means. So between now and then, if someone can find out if we.
Exactly. The both caucuses got to talk and agree to it. Majority agree.
All right, so we'll pass it as it is, and it could possibly be amended.
Good.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. WH,
PWA is to authorize the transfer of funds from department expense to equipment trackable. This is within the Parks and Trails, specifically the Emerson Park budget. We budgeted this year $50,000 for programming, and as that programming has evolved, we have seen a need to acquire and move equipment and store equipment throughout the park, and actually offer a location that can be permitted either by the state liquor authority or by the health department for doing some vending services or selling access and tickets to somebody. So instead of building a facility or having a facility built that may not line up with the master plan, we've gotten a couple of quotes from manufacturers to design for us a movable 18-foot trailer. It's got a vending window on the side for it. We can store our equipment in there, anything from a couple of other partners like the YMCA, some organizations contacted us and say, we want to do programming. Where do we put our stuff? I really don't have a building on the island right now. And as we're trying to activate it, that's a bit of a challenge for us. So in order to support that programming and have something that we can use both at that site and then at our other sites too, I think this is a good option for us. I can't buy a piece of equipment out of the programming line, but it supports the programming. So that's why there's a resolution to make the transfer out of that programming money and into equipment to buy an asset to support the programming. That's not too circular.
can I have a motion for PWA?
Clark, I'll move it.
Okay, Christina, can I have a second?
Second.
Trish, all right, discussion.
Did I hear that this is a budgeted item for a building and you're just looking to do something alternative to that?
Correct. It was budgeted under a line we usually would use for purchasing through contracts. Fireworks for the year, for example, would come out of that budget line, but I can't buy a piece of equipment out of that budget line to support the programming. So it has to be moved into an equipment line to purchase the equipment.
Understood. Yeah, okay.
Did you say somebody's gonna construct this?
Yeah. No, they're semi-custom that, we actually put an RFP out to say these are the things we needed. And we got very similar designs back from 3 different organizations, so.
Okay.
I'd have to fit it all in the box, right? So,
Trailer
yeah, and we can
from
move
site
it,
to site.
yeah, and we can move it with our trucks.
Anybody else? Not all in favor?
Good.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? PW9,
PW9 is authorizing suspension of the Emerson Park passenger car parking fees for 2022. This request comes from the Parks Commission, has met and has looked at, since we've included budgeted funds for increased programming, consistent with the programming plan design that would be from 2019, that was put together by the Biederman Redevelopment Ventures Group. And in partnership with the Friends of Emerson Park, we've programmed over 30 free public events for the season, activating the island as is consistent with that programming plan from 2019. So we'd like to look at increasing that programming and offering a diversity of revenue streams, particularly in the future from ticket sales, from vending licenses, by having more participation in some of these park activities. Therefore, the Parks Commission recommends suspending the passenger car parking fee for 2022 in participation so we can maximize the usage of the park for the year. It is important to note in the last whereas is that the Parks Commission recommends we continue charging for boat launching fees, all of our facility fees and rentals associated with the different facilities. So it's specifically just the passenger car parking fee is the suspension request for this year.
which how much is it?
The annual revenue from it
Yeah.
is anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000.
What does that cover?
Okay, can I have a motion for the,
Sorry.
I'll move it. Clarko.
can I have a second?
I'll second.
Chris, all right, now discussion.
Yeah, so there's a good reason for wanting to give up $75,000 or $100,000. How is that going to be made up in your budget?
So we have 2 grant requests out currently, and then we have the ability to sponsor some of those events as we're going into the summer. And we have some requests out to actually sponsor individual evenings and then seasonal programming. So our long-term goal is to supplant that revenue, as was in 2019 when we made the request to the Biedermann Redevelopment Ventures Group. We said, how do we offer this, but still have the revenue coming in from those events? So their long-term goal was to do more concerts, do events that were ticketed, have fees that come back from those. As you have more vendors, as you have more participation in the park, you have the ability to have vendor licenses and you get a piece of that revenue that comes in. And then as this summer is kind of a pilot program, we're trying at least 4 different types of programming to see which ones are most popular. And if we have the groups there, we have several vendors already that have committed to come in, do food and beverage sales, and generally in the future. So try to get them to come in now without you paying them. And as the events grow and become bigger, they pay you to participate in those because it's an opportunity for them to sell. And it's all in an effort to activate the island and have it be used by the public on a regular basis at events that are free to attend, although there's revenue opportunities there for vendors, which then becomes revenue that flows back to the county.
Hans?
There's an offset, the cost of taking the tickets and all that. What is that?
For an individual event, you mean?
Well, no, for the year, what are we paying out to collect the revenue?
Our ticket booth, we have anywhere from $17,000 to $20,000 worth of staffing to charge that. That is almost offset. That's pretty much offset by, we usually have about $25,000 worth of boat launching fees that come in. So that actually does cover the staffing that's in there for the season. And as I said, we're going to continue to charge for boat launching fees. Everyone really does around here. So that one for some reason seems to be more palatable from the public perspective.
Thank you.
Yep.
Did we increase the boat launching fee?
We haven't in several years. It's
We just increased the slips that were. there,
correct.
right?
Sorry. Yes. The increase we made this year was for the charge for
But
the rental
actual
slips.
coming in, the launch.
Has
is
not
the
changed.
same. Okay.
Correct.
Lydia?
You said all other park fees will not be affected, and I apologize for not knowing what those are. I know that you said vendor fees are not impacted by this, but what is also included in the all other?
Specifically, I was referring to all of every facility has a different rental fee for day use. So all of the shelters, in order to reserve the shelters, they have revenue. So I always am very careful to mention that, because when you say you're going to suspend fees, there are several different categories of fees. The other one, as Mr. Dennison just mentioned, is the boat slips that we actually rent seasonally. So those will continue. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that it's a discrete suspension of just passenger cars that would come in for the day or for an event or something.
So bottom line is you're figuring we're not losing $75,000 to $100,000.
Correct. We're trying to recoup some of it with sponsorship from this year.
We won't know. This is an experiment.
And
We're projecting not to lose.
And we're trying to get more of this ongoing daily programming so that there is something that's going on a regular basis, so that it becomes more attractive from a food service and other vending opportunities that will return revenue. And then ultimately, it would be up to the body to decide. And what has happened at a lot of other facilities is that you don't charge for parking until you have a concert or an event, in which case those are the days that you charge a premium. All that would be up to the body at that point for you to develop a concert venue where you have larger events going on. And basically those carry your revenue. The larger events carry your revenue, so that every day somebody who comes in to walk, participate in a yoga class, these are all smaller groups, they're your incremental increase in usage within the park. And it makes the facility free for those daily style of activities. And you see, it's very common in a lot of places where you go to a convention center on a day, there's no convention, there's no parking at the parking ramp, and then you go on a day there is, and it's $25 or something like that. So there are alternative revenues, but we have to bridge the gap between what we're doing now and what we want to do to further activate it. And ultimately draw in folks from a radius that's around Cayuga County too. We want those larger events.
Which, yeah, for a concert, you'll get the people out of.
You want to draw from a larger area. Absolutely. So we're in this kind of bridge now from A to get.
Anybody else for, yes,
The sheriffs and the fire boats, do they pay a rental fee for their slips?
They do not.
all right, if nothing else, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anybody got anything else for Doug? All right, if not, motion to adjourn,
Second.
second, all in favor?
Aye.
I would think nobody opposed, so I won't even ask.
(6:21). I'm going to call the meeting to order. And double check my attendance. We have legislator Basile.
Yes.
Clarko. Yes. Legislator Muldrow. Yes. Legislator Ruffini.
Here.
Legislator Shea. Legislator Strong. Great.
Here,
Thank you. Welcome. Okay, so we'll start with minutes to approve. Can we get a motion?
Move it, Mark.
Second. Okay, any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those are passed. Thank you. We have no appointments this evening. We do have a very important presentation. We have Dave Botar here from Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board to present on the long-awaited results of the broadband study that was collected, I think, by the end of July, and then worked your magic, and now you're here today to give us a presentation. So we're going to get started with that, and then we'll have some time for questions in the end.
Thanks, Amy. Good evening, everyone. Great to be here. I spoke before this committee, I don't know, a year ago, maybe even longer. Chairman of the Regional Planning Board is in the room. So thinking we've certainly been talking about, Paul and I have been talking about broadband quite a bit this past year, certainly through the summer of 2021 into the fall. What I'd like to do this evening is just do a fairly quick summary of what the study, information that is in the study. A colleague of mine, staff member at the Regional Planning Board, Annette, is handing out just to be sure that you have this information. These are maps that were previously sent to all the county legislators here in Cayuga County, but sent to you electronically. And I don't know about you, but I like seeing things in hard copy, particularly when I'm looking at maps. It really reads a lot better. So we pass out that information as well. Quick summary, obviously broadband has been a topic of real interest. Certainly this past year and the past 2 years with the impact of COVID, people having to work from home, kids at home trying to do schoolwork. Access to broadband in rural areas has certainly been a topic of discussion for a number of years. I think it brought it to the forefront because of COVID. It's certainly a topic that's been discussed fairly regularly. If I were to go back, over the last 5 years, in the Regional Planning Board, we serve 5 counties here in Central New York. And one of the topics, if I were to ask legislators, one of the key topics or one of the issues that they hear about from residents and citizens quite often is broadband service or the lack of broadband service. So it's been on the radar screen for, I'm sure, folks like yourselves, and it's been on the radar screen for us at the Regional Planning Board for a number of years. So we got a grant a couple of years ago. We had some discretion about what we could do with those grant funds. And one of the things we chose to do was to do a broadband study of the 5-county region. 4 of our 5 counties, Madison County had already done such a study. So we hired a consultant, ECC Technologies, which is based in Rochester. They've done a lot of broadband work all across upstate New York. And they have basically a formula or an approach they use that we thought would be helpful. And really the focus of that approach is trying to identify where you have gaps in service in your particular county. So if we could go to the next couple slides. Go ahead, Max. Let's stop right there.
Yep, I'll go right back.
Yeah. So what we did is engage ECC Technologies, and what they did some desktop work reviewing information that's readily available through various public sources to identify who are the major broadband providers, the companies, the Verizons and Frontiers of the world, who is providing service in your respective county. And they mapped that. That's what you're seeing in that map right there. The major telecommunication companies that have been in operation in your county for years. Go to the next slide. They also provided information, the major cable providers, which is obviously Spectrum Charter. So we have that presented graphically. Then on to the next slide. These are the smaller companies that had grown over the last 20 years, what's called the competitive local exchange carriers. So First Light and Clarity Connect are examples. Point Broadband, these names, these companies get bought and sold all the time, so the names change fairly regularly. But what you can see in the map there, it shows up at least better to my eyes in this print form where they provide service. ECC also had a survey component. You might remember seeing some advertising that we did last summer, encouraging residents and citizens across your county to go online if they had broadband service or go to their local library using their cell phone. A lot of people use their smartphone to take the survey, but to provide information about who they get their broadband service from, which is what is shown on this slide. You go to the next slide, information about who has access and who does not currently purchase broadband service in the county. So this is citizens in the county taking the survey, and all of that information was collected and mapped. Each one of those dots represents a person taking the broadband survey and providing information. But this really hit the road, if you go, is this next map. So the two key parts of ECC study was, one, the community survey to get sort of anecdotal information from residents throughout your county. But the other key part was to map where there are gaps in broadband service in your county. And what ECC literally did is put people on the road in a car, generally two people in the car, visually observing what they could see visually, which is typically, most of the broadband service, certainly in Cayuga County and much of upstate New York, outside of the urban areas, is primarily coaxial cable spectrum. So they literally drove every road outside of the urban areas in Cayuga County in this case. So they didn't drive every road in Auburn because Auburn is well served. And in some of the villages in Cayuga County, they didn't drive all the streets in the village because they could tell if the village was served by broadband. If you had coaxial cable to come up to the village boundary on the east side, and then the coaxial cable or fiber line picks up on the west side, then the village is served as well. But they drove almost every road outside of these urban areas that I just described to inventory where there is service and where there is not service. And then they take that information, go back into their office, and they mapped it. And that's what you're seeing in that map right there. Those lines, the actual lines themselves, the roads, identify where there is no broadband service. This was as of last summer. So the summer of 2021 is when they completed their field work.
Can you repeat that? So where does it show there's no service at?
It's the red lines on the map. The green dots are the addresses that don't have service. So that's just a way to, you have the number of road miles and you have the number of addresses. And as you would expect, in the rural areas of Cayuga County and in the rural areas of every county in upstate New York, you have gaps in service. And what the broadband providers, again, is primarily coaxial cable, it's primarily spectrum, but they will go up a road, right, where they think they have enough customers, and they will string the coaxial cable. Then they might get to a point on that road where you go further up the road, there are no customers, no residents, or very few. They stop providing service. And you go further up the road, they may pick up and provide service again where they have more customers. So now that this is all boiled down, it doesn't seem like much, but the information is really critical. What we know about Cayuga County as of the summer of 2021, you have about 260 road miles where you do not have broadband service today. And that represents about almost 2,600 addresses. Those numbers are fairly typical of what we see in all 5 counties in Central New York. Cortland County has the most road miles without service gaps in service. As you would expect, Onondaga County has the least number of miles. But we know from this study where you do not have broadband service in this county. We know actual addresses. We know the specific pieces of roads. You blow this map up. What you see in the information that Tom handed out, we took this information and then in our office, we presented it at town level. So we have what you have in the packet we handed out shows every town in Cayuga County. And if you flip through those maps, you'll see where there are gaps in service. So that's where I think the information really gets to be much more granular and much more helpful to you to assess the situation in this case in Cayuga County. If you go to the next slide, we have the same information simply presented in table form. And you can look up your specific town or towns that you're interested in. And I don't think you would be surprised, some of the more rural towns have the largest number of miles of gaps in service. So what did our study accomplish? It was a lot of time, a lot of effort on the consultant's part, a lot of pages of narrative, but it really boils down to the map we just showed you in this table. We know you have 261 miles. In this county, people who they live there or they would like to live there, they are not going to have what we would consider modern wired broadband service. They might have satellite service. I think everybody has found satellite service is not an acceptable level of service in today's world. It's very expensive and it can be very spotty. So that's what our study accomplished. We know exactly where the problem is. If you want to flip ahead, we also worked with the consultants to try to identify are there any grants that have been awarded in Cayuga County in this case that could help eliminate some of those gaps. And there's a federal program, and there was state money as well. And what's shown in those shaded areas is some of the smaller broadband companies. You see the names listed here, Frontier Hughes, which is satellite service, Verizon, New Visions, and TDS Telecom. They are receiving grants from the federal government to build out the network further in Cayuga County. It's going to take them time to build that out. There is some question whether they were ever build out all the infrastructure that they received grant money for. They have, I think, a total of 6 years. What's the time frame, Tom?
Started in 2017.
2017, and they have, I believe, 6 years.
Once they get the funding, it's 6 years. It's a 10-year full process. So some of them are just getting awarded some of their money now. And then once they get 6 years after that. For some, depending on which program it is.
So if you happen to live in one of those shaded areas, or you're concerned about a residence in one of those shaded areas, help is on the way, but it could take a considerable period of time. And there is some question. Talk with our consultant, ECC, whether all of this money will be fully deployed in the areas it's been awarded. But there's been a considerable effort over the last 5 years at the federal and state level to try to close the gaps in service in upstate New York. New York State committed $500 million, and some of the telecom companies and broadband companies have used that money, companies like New Visions. But there are still gaps in service. And so what we have today is the federal government is going to provide more money to try to eliminate the gaps in service and improve broadband service, not only here in New York State, but across the country. And that's really where we're trying to get counties oriented. So the federal government is going to make available $65 billion. Sounds like a lot of money. It's a lot of money if it ends up in your pocket. But, $65 billion across the country. And these funding resources we have summarized in one of the handouts we left you. $65 billion, most of it is going to get allocated from the federal government to the state. And the state is considering a number of options. One of the options is to take their allocation and make it available to counties and municipalities who want to step forward and take a more proactive role in addressing broadband service in their respective counties. So what we're trying to do now is help you start to wrestle with some of the questions and position the county, if you want to go that route, to be sure that Cayuga County gets its share of the federal money. It's going to go to the state. The state we think is going to make available at the local level. The state governor, the budget that was just adopted, the number is $1.4 billion. 800 of that 1.4 is the federal money. So the state's going to put a lot of money out there for broadband. We won't know the rules of the game until the fall of this year. But that's literally around the corner right now. Counties need to start making some serious decisions about what role, if any, you want to take to improve broadband service in your particular county. Go on to the next slide, Max. So there's a lot of next steps. That's where we're trying to get everyone oriented. Go on to the next slide. What we're going to do now is go through a couple slides that I think get some key questions on the table that you need to be wrestling with, we think. Does the county have its own internal needs for fiber service throughout the county? Maybe to connect your county buildings throughout the county. That's an example. Does the county want to own and maintain the fiber? That's a big question. Does the county even want to be in the broadband business? You got a lot of responsibilities now. How could you possibly take on one more responsibility? But some counties are actually doing it. Does the county want to have a partner, a private sector partner it works with to improve broadband service? And does the county have any money it's willing to allocate to help improve broadband service in your respective county? We've been talking with each of our counties this past year about perhaps setting aside a small portion, a portion of your ARPA funds, the federal funds that came in last year, to help prime the pump to address broadband needs in your county and to take advantage of what we think will be the federal funds that may require a local match. And we all know the federal state grant game, they love to put money on the table, but they want the municipality, the county to match what they're putting on the table. So we're talking with Cortland County several weeks ago, and I made sort of the bold suggestion, you ought to reserve a portion of whatever ARPA funds you may have remaining that isn't committed. We were talking $4 to $5 million in Cortland County. Simply an example, a suggestion. Reserve that money so that you're in a strong position to compete for the state funds. I think the state, they're gonna want to spread their money as best they can. Counties that are willing to match the state money, maybe it's 90% state money and you're throwing in 10%. It'll improve your competition for the state funds. Go on to the next slide, additional questions. Does the county, in terms of its own fiber needs, do you want to connect your public safety towers? Do you want to connect your municipalities? There's a number of different needs for fiber service. On to the next slide. This is where you can get into the weeds pretty quickly. If you were to own a fiber system, the information here is the annual operating cost, about 10% of what your build out cost would be. And to build out fiber in this county, you're in the $15 to $25 million range. So, the annual maintenance cost on such a system could be considerable. Does the county, if you want to be in the broadband business, then, it's 24/7 like, other kinds of services that we're all used to. You can outsource the maintenance. There are revenue opportunities, though. If you own the broadband system, what you do is you build out the system and you have extra strands of dark fiber. This is as far as I know, technically about broadband. And a lot of these small internet service companies would be willing to lease some of that fiber from you, and it can be a revenue opportunity. And our consultant, ECC Technologies, who we still have under contract, is available to sit with you and get into the details of any of these ideas. So you don't have to figure this out all on your own. We've got ECC contract to help. On to the next slide. This is really sort of a repeat of the previous slide. Let's go on to the next one because I know time is tight here. You have another option, which is you don't have to own and operate it all by yourself. You could own it and have a third-party company like a Clarity Connect, like a New Visions, who manage the system on your behalf. That's the model that Madison County is actually pursuing right now. On the next slide, we just give you a quick thumbnail that 261 miles gaps in service. It's about $50,000 a mile to build out, whether it's fiber or coaxial cable. Actually, about $50,000 a mile today. And prices are going up. So you're looking at, $13.5 million, the cost to eliminate that 261 miles of gaps in service in the county. Now, you don't have to think that you would have to cover that full $13.5 million yourself. If you partnered with one of these companies, maybe they would cover 50% of the cost, and maybe you cover 50% of the cost. And you would try to get to a number through an RFP process and see what the market is willing to do. But ECC is telling us they don't think counties would have to bear that full $13.4 million, $5 million. It's probably a 50-50 split, maybe 60-40, with a company picking up 60, you picking up 40. You can see where I get to my $4 to $5 million number, though. It's really tied to what the consultant, so you got 13.5, the consultant picks up 60%, you're left with the rest. But these are real numbers. That's what I'm trying to impress on each of our counties. We know the number of miles of gaps in service. We know the number of households or addresses, and we know what it costs to build it out. So all of that unknown, we've eliminated. So it puts you in a position to take on the challenge if you want to take on the challenge. So there's basically 4 major models that are operative right now. The first one we call filling in the gaps. County issues an RFP, companies come to the table, they'll say, we'll fill out all 261 miles of gaps in service in your county. We'll cover 60% of the cost. You got to pony up the other 40%. You pick one or more of these companies. They have to build it out under this model. They don't get a nickel from you till it's built out, functioning and working, and then you pay them the negotiated price. A much more aggressive approach is the county builds, owns, and operates its own broadband system in Cayuga County. The numbers here would be significantly more. If you were to build fiber on all of your road miles in Cayuga County, you're probably pushing $50 million. And a lot of those areas are already served by these private companies. But there's some counties that are going to do that. You have the public-private partnership model, which is what Madison County is doing now. And then, the last, which is really sort of a repeat of the open access. You build, own, and operate the broadband. So you don't just have the dark fiber out there, but you're running a broadband system in the county. Those are the major choices out there. There's pluses and minuses to each. There's a lot of money at play here. And if we go to, let me move up a couple slides here. A couple more, Max, one more. Some examples. Erie County is being very aggressive. Urban County, but apparently they have a lot of rural areas in Erie County that do not have service. They're taking $34 million of their ARPA money and they're going to build out their own open access fiber system in Erie County. So that's the most aggressive play. Madison County, they're ahead of the game. They did this study a couple of years ago. They applied to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They got a $10 million grant, and they partnered with Empire Access, Empire Telephone Company, and they're going to build out a fiber system that will be owned by the county, but operated and maintained by Empire Telephone, and there'll be a revenue sharing arrangement between the county and Empire. Onondaga County, up until a couple months ago, the politics in Onondaga County is a little challenging right now. If you follow the Syracuse newspapers, they were prepared to go the RFP route. Just put an RFP out there, hire one or two companies, have those companies fill the gaps and provide the subsidy to them. That's the model they're using. They were prepared to spend $13.5 million of their ARPA funds. I get it. They got a lot more ARPA money than Cayuga County got. They got 89, but they're willing to spend a big chunk of that. Why did Onondaga County choose its direction in Erie County, two urban counties? Up until December of last year anyways, Onondaga County, from the administrative standpoint, they did not want to be in the broadband business. They didn't want to own it. They didn't want to operate it. They just wanted to be sure that their residents had service. And so they chose that route. Erie County, much more aggressive play. I think they see a revenue opportunity, and there is a real revenue opportunity there. But now it's entrepreneurial. You're getting in the risk main. They've chosen that route. I think Madison County kind of strikes the middle ground with their approach. And it works for them in part because they got a very large federal grant, the USDA Reconnect grant. But what is useful there, Madison County is very willing to talk to any county, certainly any county within our membership. So Cayuga, Cortland, Madison, Onondaga, Oswego. They've been very helpful. Their administration, Mark Scamone, their county administrator, is willing to meet with you, talk with you, explain to you why they chose the route they went. They used the same consultant we're using, ECC Technology. So we have a resource. I mean, they're in the weeds now, dealing with it every day. and they're committing, a sizable chunk of county money. They're going to bond for it. And they plan to repay the bond from the revenue sharing arrangement that they have within their telephone. So it's a pretty aggressive play in this case. This last slide is sort of a hybrid approach. If you wanted to fill the gaps and build out fiber, considerably more expense would be incurred by Cayuga County. And then on to the last slide, or next to last slide, stay there, Max. There's a lot of grant money. We all know the grant game. There will be tremendous competition for it. The counties in central New York are well positioned because we have the study done. The study we had done was tailored by ECC because ECC knows what these federal and state agencies that are involved in the broadband business, what they want to see. We have the information from our study that they want to see. So you don't have to do any background research, any study. We have that information, so you're well positioned to compete for federal and state grants moving forward. But you got to make some decisions soon. If you wait, this money will be announced, the fall of 2022. A lot of counties are getting organized right now. They're making decisions right now. If you wait for all the rules of the road to be laid out for you, it's going to be too late. So let me stop there. I can get into a lot of detail on each one of these slides, but I don't think that's the purpose of tonight. Was for me to reaffirm we completed the study. I showed you the two key slides. Out of all that work, we know exactly where your gaps are. We know exactly the number of addresses, and we know what it costs. And we know the major options and choices that you had in front of you. What ECC suggests is, reconvene and, we can get into the various options you have in much more detail in subsequent discussions. But this was just to give you the data and give you a suggestion of the kind of questions that you need to be wrestling with right now. That's it.
Great. A lot of information to digest tonight. Initial questions?
I have a question. Earlier, you mentioned that some of the projects that had some money coming in were probably not going to be fulfilled. Is that because the rest of the money is not going to come in, or is the company not going to get the job done?
So the grants have been awarded, cost is going through the roof. The whole supply chain issue is very real, and you pick your industry, the supply chain issue is real. And so a number of the companies may simply decide it doesn't make business sense for them. Even though they got the grant award, it costs them money to build out the system. Even if they have a grant, it costs them money to maintain the system. And they may decide there simply aren't enough customers, even with the grant, to justify us building it all out. So that's a possibility. We won't know. They have 6 years to go forward with it. So if you're a very small company where finances are tight, they might not be able to do it. It's just the competitive forces of the marketplace right now. To their credit, they made the application. They applied. These private companies applied. The county didn't have to apply. You didn't miss an opportunity. This was set up for the private companies. The big boys, Verizon, Frontier, they can carry more costs, but they have a lot of expenses too. So they applied, sort of get the funding reservation, and now we got to figure out what are we really going to do. That's what happened. It was get the application in, see how much grant money we're going to get. Okay, now we know our grant amount. Now let's see if it makes business sense for us. And some of them may simply come to the conclusion it doesn't make sense. But if all the awards that were made in Cayuga County were built out, your 261 miles would get reduced to about 175 miles. So you would still have 175 miles of gaps in service in Cayuga County. Rough estimate.
Just comparing apples to apples, the counties that have done this, and like you said, Madison County, was their mileage of 206, was it comparable to the gaps that we've had in the amount of people?
Yeah, yes, it is. They had a little bit more, actually, more miles than Cayuga County. But it's, they're all right around 300 miles plus or minus.
Have we actually, and I don't know if you guys done this, but I imagine you were just driving the road, you had some type of meter or something to check the signal, or did you survey the 2,500 people to find if this is even I'm sure there's a lot of people who want broadband, but I'm saying, is there people that have gotten satellites that don't find it to be, I don't know, I'm just saying, like, do we find out there's demand for this by those 2,500 people?
Yeah, so the survey work, the second part of the study, and I can't present it in quick form in a PowerPoint. We asked people, do you have service? Do you not have service? If you don't have service, why not? Is it a question of affordability? That's the primary issue. So if I were to drill into it, I can get that information. I can't present it right now. But you have two issues. It's the gap in service. You have some residences, they may have broadband that goes by their house. Either they choose, they simply don't want it, or maybe they can't afford it. And the issue of affordability is obviously a very real issue. What we're trying to get at with this study is, first things first, you got to eliminate the gaps, because whether you can afford it or not isn't even relevant if you don't have the service out on the road front. So what we've been trying to do is keep counties focused on this first issue, eliminate the gaps. You can then circle back and maybe try to address issues of affordability through other financial resources, through federal and state grants. But the first thing you got to do is eliminate the gaps.
So you're thinking it's be roughly about 6.4 million, 6.5 million for this project with grants?
If we're left with 175 miles, multiply that out by 50,000 a mile, I'll have my calculator out. But yeah, you're in that number. What's interesting, and I get kind of pretty far out on the limb spending your money, but this is one of those public policy, public issues where you literally have an opportunity to eliminate the problem. You always need to pave more roads. You always need new equipment. That goes on forever. But we have a very unique moment in time right now with the federal grant funds that were made available, the ARPA funds, and the federal grant funds that are coming down the road, where you as a county could say to your residents, we are going to eliminate all gaps in service. So everybody in Cayuga County can have access. Now, some families, again, may not want it or may not be able to afford it, separate issue, but you can solve the access problem in fairly short order, which is, unusual. Most issues, right? They exist forever. You're wrestling with them forever.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, we'll do.
was there someone else first?
Oh, she'll be after you, and just let her know.
Okay. So you mentioned that there was 261 miles, 175 miles would be remaining if these other projects were completed. The Empire State Development Corporation has outstanding contracts that aren't complete. Do you know if any of this overlaps with those outstanding contracts that are not complete?
Yeah, we're actually trying to get that information now so that so we can be a resource to you and provide each county with that information. It should be readily available. It's not, and we're trying to get at it right now.
If you get that information, I'd like to have it because I've been talking to the Empire State Development Corporation for my district and it's radio silence.
Yeah.
And it's a big issue because there's contracts out there and these contractors have started the work, but it's not completed or it's partially done. And I don't know if they've walked, if we're going after their bonding to get the work done. And it makes me skeptical to think that any other government project, because we don't do good at running private business, is going to be any better. And to take $6 million of ARPA money and put it aside for another failing opportunity for private business to take our money is not something I'll be in favor of. I don't know how we secure that if the state is running this other program, and I'm telling you, I'm not finding out good things. And I hope the citizen is listening so they can do some real newspaper investigation and find out what's already going on in our county with broadband that we should have had that started in 2017.
I think the issue that you're touching on, there are some officials at the state level, including the governor. It appears to us, now the rules aren't out yet. It appears to us they're going to take a different approach. First time around, $500 million. It was the state had the money and they entered into contracts with companies. Counties weren't part of it. And these kind of problems are being experienced. State right now is saying, why don't we take a different approach? Pass the money through to the counties. So, okay, you can say, well, now it's our headache. But at least it's closer to your level of government and you can have more controls in place. Onondaga County, when we were talking with them last summer, and the county executive, we were talking about Empire State Development, those grants, the RDOF grants that we looked at in one slide, and explaining, well, it could take 6 years for them to build out. We're not sure if they're going to complete it. And he's like, enough. I'm not going to wait for those companies. I'm going to put my money on the table. We're going to enter into contracts directly between the county and the company or companies they select. And they don't get a penny of the county money until they build out the system. So that's the approach Onondaga County was considering, which I think is really a credible, viable approach to consider. And I think that's what's going to unfold this year with the state.
Without talking to Mark, city owner, John Becker, what was their motivation? I mean, obviously they're first out with this. They have they've had the experience there. Their experience at PCC lend itself to us getting involved.
Yes.
What was their motivation? Is it the number of universities? Was it the public outcry? What do you know?
It was primarily public outcry. There was one, they have a board of supervisors, so there was one supervisor in a rural town down near Colgate University, town of Hamilton. And she happens to be a beef farmer, and she was just so frustrated with the lack of service. It was hurting her business. She became a big advocate and built support among other legislators. And to be honest, I was very surprised that the county, Madison County, stood up and made the decision to provide the matching funds to go with the federal grant application. So it was the public outcry. But the model they chose, okay, they wanted to eliminate the gaps in service, but the other issue is they wanted to introduce competition in the broadband business in their county. So in all of our counties, right, Spectrum has most of it tied up, and broadband service is expensive, $50, $60 a month. And Madison County was intrigued with the idea of, can we build some competition into the marketplace? So Empire Telephone is going to be building fiber over, adjacent to, on the same pole lines in certain areas of Madison County, creating competition for spectrum. And, they're making a business decision that they can win that competitive battle. Interesting play in the marketplace. Madison County was thrilled to hear it. So, you have the issue of gaps in service, but this other issue of affordability and the lack of competition. I think that's what Erie County is trying to get at. Residents are frustrated with Spectrum controlling the marketplace or Verizon controlling the marketplace. And they see merit of introducing competition in the marketplace. So that's what's going on. That is what is going on.
Legislator Monroe, did you have?
Yeah, following up with, Jim's question about overlapping. So right now there's grants for like $6 million out there for these individual companies to complete these jobs. Even though they may not be able to fulfill it, they obviously $6 million will cover something, right? Have they ever said, perhaps we can't cover the 176 miles, but we can cover 100 of it, and the burden from the county might be lessened because of that? Is that something that's being discussed, or is it all or nothing type deal?
Well, that's the RFP model, where we actually have a draft RFP that we ECC prepared for Onondaga County. So, okay, here's our map. There's the number of road miles. Here's our estimate of cost. And how much of that cost are you willing to pay, private company? And how much does the county have to put on the table? So the RFP model is really a very quick, efficient way to know how much subsidy you have to provide to get beyond sort of just the speculation and the idle talk. You go to the marketplace. Now, what you don't get, right, is the guarantee the company will build it out, which is obviously a legitimate concern.
I think Jim is also saying that he's not even getting a conversation. So it's hard to facilitate a conversation like that with RFP if you don't really have a conversation going on.
Well, we're getting rid of the middleman. So Empire State, you no longer have a middleman. It'd be just like the contracts the county enters into now with, whatever, you hire companies to pave however many miles of road, let's say. So it's a negotiation directly between the county and the broadband company.
Yeah, but where I'm confused that there's a certain amount of grant that's allotted to some of those major companies that you put on the board.
Right.
We don't have control that state money going to them.
Right.
But we also don't know how much of that state money could be utilized to pay for any roads. So it's kind of like, or any routes. That's the problem. Like, once they determine to give the counties the responsibility for the facility and the conversation, it's a lot easier. But there's also some money out there now that might lessen the burden of the county. So that's where I'm confused at. Like, how do we get that conversation going? 'Cause I think that conversation needs to happen.
Yeah, we're trying to find a way ourselves, and we may not be any more successful than you, but we're going to lean on our consultant, ECC, knows the industry and has the contacts with all the players. There's no question they're playing it very close to the vest. The broadband companies, they read the same thing that we all read. They see a lot of federal grant money coming down the pipe. So they may be waiting to build out where they already have grant awards, then that's what you're referring to see if they can get even more grant money on the table. There's not, you don't have complete control of the situation. And I think challenge for the county is, well, what decisions can we make based on the information that we do? I think it would be a rational decision to say, okay, we got 261 miles. There's grants in place now to cover a chunk of that. We're left with 175 miles. Let's focus on the 175 miles. I think that would be a very rational decision. Now, you get all done, you take care of your 175 miles, and these companies don't build out where they were supposed to, you still got a problem in your county. But we can't control those companies for sure. So it is a problem.
Legislator Carr?
So,
Sorry.
go ahead. No.
I have quite a few questions that I'm only gonna ask a few right now, but
You know where to find me, Trish.
yeah, I appreciate that we've gotten to this point. I think we're strongly positioned, like you said, to go after grant funding for some of this if we decide this is what we want to do. Personally, I think this is one of my top priorities as a legislator. I'm in the city, so I don't have to worry about internet access, but there's huge discrepancies, and there has been since the beginning of time. So this is the time right now where there's money available to do something. I definitely have the same concerns though about some of this stuff that's already been going on that's not getting completed correctly. Anyway, my question for you tonight, Dave, is just with regard to the data itself. And did you guys also look at areas that are currently being served, but that have spotty or weak connections? Because I know there's certain areas of the county where they are being served, but there's not great internet coverage.
Yeah, we get at it a little bit from the community survey, the resident survey that was done. So again, if you remember one of the maps that was up there, everybody who took the survey was a little dot on the map, that's their address. And we can look at that information and they may say, yeah, I have service, but the speed is not adequate. So we can take that information and try to get a little bit granular. So we could have a road that shows that it has service. But if we have 2 or 3 residences along that stretch of road that are saying the service is not adequate, then we know there's a problem with the equipment that is in place. It's sort of a, it's a serious issue. It's how much of this problem do you want to take on at one time? I think eliminating the gaps is a huge change. If we take care of if you take care of the gaps, then maybe the next phase is, okay, where is service not up to current standards? And can we try to address that problem next? That's how I'm thinking about it in my own, discussions internally and with the ECC, but it clearly is a problem. There's no question, Trish.
And one last question in terms of businesses were part of this survey.
Yes.
So we know kind of countywide where those gaps are for our business as well.
Yeah.
So I would think that, I guess our next questions would be, what is a timeline for us? Obviously, we need to digest this, to discuss this amongst all of us. We have to get the answer to the overlap question about what's currently being done. Does that eliminate some of the data here that's being presented? What's a timeline that we should be cognizant of?
I'm thinking April, May, June. Some key decisions. Can you put some money in reserve for broadband? I'm just going to be very direct. This is just me. Put some issues on the table. I'll just put the number out. Reserve 5 million of your ARPA. Just reserve it today for broadband. You may not need to use all of it, but if you don't reserve it, I know there's a lot of demand for that money. But reserve 5, would you consider or make a decision to reserve 4 million or 5 million for broadband. That's one issue to wrestle with right now. Second issue is, do you really have the appetite to be more ambitious and to consider a public-private partnership or an outright ownership of a broadband system in your county? You rightly say, well, I don't know if we want to own and operate because I don't know what the numbers are. I get that. We can get you those numbers. But if you could make a decision right now that said, we would never, and that was Onondaga County's position, bigger county, wealthier county. But they made the decision early on, there is no way we're going to own and operate a broadband system in Onondaga County. So they made that decision. Madison County made a different decision, and Erie County made a different decision. Now, I'm sure early on, Madison County, they didn't know the numbers. They didn't have the business plan all thought out. But they made a decision they would consider owning a broadband system in their county. Would you be willing to consider owning a broadband system? You own roads, right? You own infrastructure. Would you? Maybe yes, or maybe your decision is no, we are not going to take on ownership of one more thing in this county. So I think that decision can be wrestled with right now. And then, would you consider the public-private partnership? Would you be willing to own it by entering into a formal contract with an Empire Telephone or a Clarity Connect? It's a sort of like a joint venture. Do you have the appetite for that? And what ECC is saying to us is counties need to wrestle with these sort of big questions first. So you could say, I'm not suggesting to you that if the decision is, yeah, we would be willing to consider it, that you're obligated to do it. Obviously, you would have to see all the numbers. You would have to, analyze the legal implications, the insurance implications. I mean, it's a complex business decision. But if the decision right now is absolutely not, no way, then let's make that decision so we know that that option is off the table.
Madam Chair. I know this is pretty simple. I just want to be clear. The revenue, if you were a partner or own it, would come from the monthly payment charges that people would make at their homes.
Yes.
That was 200 and those 2,500 people. So more importantly, we have to find out what measures, because to me personally, I'd be in favor of partnering with somebody because it's $6 million just gone, right? And I think it's the interesting thing to find out if you could provide a survey to find out if there's a total outcry and how many of these people actually really want this. I think that's the first question.
We have that in the survey.
Okay, that I think you can email it to me would be nice. Sure. Because that's a number that I think that we're really ahead of ourselves, because it makes a difference if you surveyed 500 of the 2,500 people, and maybe half of them said they wanted it. So that tells you there that, there might not be, we're either doing this as a service issue, there's not enough money out there, there might not be enough demand out there. I think that's the key, is to find that survey of how many people, if it's a total outcry or not. So I think I would like to see those numbers.
We can get you that, and I would just encourage you to, lean on the Madison County model heavily, because the character of Madison County is very similar to Cayuga County. And I don't know the number, but they made a decision that there were going to be enough customers signing up that they were going to be able to retire. I believe it's a $5 million bond. It's several thousand, 2,000, it's somewhere in that. The other part of the Madison County model is that they think not only they're going to pick up customers who don't have service now, but they're going to pick up customers who are going to drop their current provider and sign on with the Madison County system.
I have a question about that. Is that, do they think that will happen because they're gonna provide it at a lower cost, or that they see it a different benefit to going with?
I think it's primarily lower cost.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So you keep referencing ECC technologies and Dave, right?
Yes.
So who do you represent or who do you work for?
So I'm executive director of the Central New York Regional Planning
Okay.
Development Board. So we're a public planning agency.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I introduced him, but I know you.
I don't know
So
everyone.
I just blurted it out.
Yeah, okay.
We're a member of that group and we
Yep.
have representation on that board.
Okay.
So I'm wearing a public hat here. You know, I'm working for you, for Cayuga County. We hired ECC Technologies, a private company, to do our study. And, you know, they're technical experts. I am not on broadband. I basically shared with you tonight everything I know about broadband. And there's so much more to it. We got to have a consultant to help. And I can have them here.
We would lean on Dave to help us through this whole process.
I'm glad you're wearing your public hat tonight. I appreciate you being here so we can ask you these questions. So you hired ECC to do the survey. And of that survey, did they interview any of the internet companies, the broadband companies?
They did not interview them, no.
Okay, notwithstanding, there may be some issues that we're not aware of in rural areas.
Sure.
Especially when you're going to put something in the ground. So I wanted to, probably the next step before we talk about money or reserve funds is to maybe get them in here and find out what challenges they had in order to resolve this. And that might make a difference of filling in the gaps of the 261 that may be out there. And some of it may not be feasible, like you said, but.
Yeah, for the companies, you know, I think we can all appreciate them. It's a simple business decision. Do they have enough customers to justify the investment? If they had enough customers along that stretch of road, they would have built out.
We wouldn't be sitting here.
We wouldn't be sitting here. There aren't enough customers to justify investing $50,000 a month.
And I get part of it, but I know that some municipalities can be territorial and don't want broadband companies coming in there and digging their ground without authorization or permits or, you know what I mean? So I get the population bit of it. But we'll have to decide that, I guess.
Bob brings up an interesting point. Do they put these I would call them towers, right? Is that the proper term? The fiber, do they put on people's residence or do they find county property? Like where are these? Because I've always heard of somebody living in an area like that, they got some type of compensation for putting on their property. Is that what we're talking about?
No, this is primarily stringing
Telephone poles?
coaxial cable or fiber along the telephone pole lines along your road.
So our municipalities, you're saying, Bob, they could have an issue? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, not, especially if any of it's gonna go underground. I don't know if any has or not. That's what I hear. It may or may not be accurate, but
So
the lines.
it's another conversation for another day, but I can tell you that they only have issues, they don't have the proper permitting, bonds and insurance when you're going through a municipality. I've been going round and round with some of these questions to find out why it stopped in District 1. And it was mostly because of not obtaining the proper permits, because they weren't supplying the proper insurance, the proper bonds, the proper this. 15 outstanding permits by the New York State DOT in my district, which we're finally down to 3 or 4 that we need. It's not that they're being territorial. They're following policies and procedures that are in their municipalities for that type of work when it's going underground, which I would recommend would be the best way to go versus a tower. But
And to piggyback on what Jim is saying, conversations with New Horizons.
New Visions,
Thank you. With New Visions, they were putting their pedestals in places where our highway departments were going to tear them up with the wings of their plows, for example. So there was a lot of, it seemed like there was a lack of coordination.
Yes, by the installers.
Yeah, a lot of these companies, I don't know if New Visions has all of its own crews, but a lot of this work is subbed out.
Correct.
And
Very
so,
familiar with it.
You get down to basic problems, the quality of the crew. They do their work properly. All of those issues clearly come into play here.
Thank you for doing this. And could I get a copy of that presentation that?
I can get that.
Get it? Thank you, Max.
You send that to all of
I'll
us.
send it to
Thank you.
You want a copy, Jim?
Yes, Mr. Lynch?
Aileen, it might be helpful to clarify that the survey was not directly to those 2,600 people. It was a survey that there was a lot of outreach, but people had to voluntarily take the survey. So it's not as if we have, Mr. Muldrow, surveyed those 2,600 people per se. A subset of that survey obviously was probably those 2,600 people and can give some insights into some of the questions you asked.
So I'll follow up with some emails to this committee, as well as continue this conversation. It does give us a lot to think about. We've all had issues, I'm sure, that we've heard from constituents with issues of access. It's a very important issue for our county, of course.
Huge.
So in the meantime, I can collect questions, or I'm sure you can send them directly to David Botar, and I'll share his email as well. And then we'll contact you with our questions, and we'll probably need further clarification. I'm sure you amenable to coming back. If we need.
Absolutely. I think it would probably be helpful if you were to have me back for me to bring ECC the next time, because then you would have the technical expertise. They could do a far better job than I can do in answering some of your technical questions and also getting into more detail about those 4 different models that I presented tonight. But there are some near-term issues. I think you can begin to make some decisions, not final decisions, but what ECC says, and I'll stop here. I know we're getting late. For them to be helpful to you, they need to have a sense of what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. They don't want to spend time exploring an option that, even at this early stage, you want to take off the table. Now, if you want to keep all the options on the table, fine, but the more we can focus their attention, the more helpful they can be to you.
Yeah, that gives us a lot to think about, talk and discuss. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Something needs to revive Tom Brown.
Next, we'll start with Mr. Lynch from Planning Economic Development.
Given the time that the excellent presentation discussion took, I had about 7 things I was going to mention. I'll put them in a PDF and send them out to the committee. They're just some updates on a few things. If anybody has any questions on anything that was in my committee report, I'm happy to expand on it. I do have 3 resolutions, and I want to thank the chair and the committee for allowing one to be added yesterday. And I did email it to the whole committee so that at least you had some explanation and a little bit about that resolution. So in the interest of time, I'm available to answer questions. And if you want to do the resolutions, I'm available to do that as well.
It's fair to say the right to resolution. I know that there's been a lot of dialogue over email. I appreciate the dialogue.
Great, and I appreciate getting questions ahead of time. It kind of helps to frame it. The first resolution is authorizing a vendor contact for our HHW events, household hazardous waste. Went through procurement process. Actually, this is a vendor that we worked for a number of years ago. And it's actually lower cost than the one that we had. So I ask for your approval of that. It's in our budget. The HHW event, just so you know, a few years ago, the state changed it from giving us the grant during the year that we were doing it. Now what we have to do is we have to go through, hold the events, document everything that we recycled or what the costs actually were, and then submit for a grant by March of the following year to get that money back. So far, we've been doing that, and it's been paying for half the cost of these events.
Is there a motion for PL2? And second.
I'll second, Clark.
All right, discussion on PL2? None, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
The second resolution is just authorizing permission for the USDA to put European fruit fly traps on county property and monitor them for the next year.
Get a motion?
Move, Mark.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
The last one is the added resolution, which is just authorizing a very small professional services contract with our Wasco Flats engineers so that they can provide with us cost estimates and timeframe and so on, so that we can start to think about going out and getting the funds we need to build a permanent access to this project.
I'd like to move that.
Thank you. Motion.
I'll second, Clark.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Unless there's anything else, I'll take it.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next with planning, Kelly King, employment and training.
Right. Good evening. I'll also be brief. As you can see in the beginning of my report, I essentially just go through program updates, foot traffic, services, seeing a huge increase in our foot traffic in the center more recently, which is good news. The last time I was here, I think we talked about the Department of Labor staff and not providing in-person services. I do have an update on that. Starting next week, they're going to be able to work in our resource room 2 days a week. And then the next week, we're going to do 3 days. So we're slowly phasing the Department of Labor staff back in. They're still not serving customers in person. So they will strictly just be working our front desk, and then hopefully they will start seeing people in person, but that is still not the plan. It's just to work in the resource room. That will relieve my staff. They're working 5 days a week for on their own. So that's good. I'm happy about that. Two things.
Here, can I?
Yes.
I need to ask before I forget. Did they give an explanation why other than they didn't have enough plexiglass to be serving people face to face?
Yes.
On this long, and your department has to take the brunt of this while, they're still sitting at home.
They work part of the time at home and part of the time in our office, but yes, not public facing as they typically did. I asked that question because clearly I am frustrated with that as well. And the answer that I was given essentially is that they were concerned about their staff's safety if somebody came in and didn't want to wear a mask or came in and weren't happy about their unemployment benefits. And they weren't prepared to put their staff through that. That was the answer that I was given. But there's some hope on the horizon, so it's good.
I guess I'm just gonna ask, who do you talk to when you ask that question? And is it something, and I appreciate everything you're doing. What I'm trying to figure out is why these people can't get back in and help you out.
Yeah, I think
you're taking staff away from your time. I'm not mad at you, I'm just mad at the situation. it's frustrating.
Yeah.
And, you know, who runs that department?
I mean, it's the state agencies across the board. It's not just the New York State Department of Labor from the way I understand it. It's the state, you know, not just the division of Department of Labor. So I think it's frustrations across the state and not just with, you know, our local Department of Labor, but, you know, it's a challenge we've been working through, and we've been, you know, we've been serving the community except for the first 2 weeks of the pandemic. And so I'm proud of my department for really pushing through. Probably, you know, I'm probably the one with the hardest feelings than my staff that are actually up there doing it. But you know, it's going to get better.
And I appreciate what you do. It seems like we should be able to make a phone call. We should be doing something to help you. And that frustrates me too.
Well, thank you.
Is there anything we can do to help you?
No, we're doing okay.
We got 15 emails in here.
Yeah. Do you want to take?
I know Jim's gonna be the first one. I'll just copy all of us on it, you know.
No, I think that we are a small department. It's definitely been a challenge, you know, but like I said, next week we're going to phase them in, and then eventually the first week of May, they're going to be able to help us out more, you know, regularly. I don't know when they're going to see in person yet or do workshops. That's still not, there isn't a schedule for that yet, but, you know, okay. So, no, yes, you're welcome. The other couple of things, really youth focused right now. So, you know, another challenge that we are trying to overcome is how to capture the youth in the community and get them engaged in our programs. So we entered into a contract with a company called the Purple Gator, and they're essentially a marketing firm that will do youth outreach and recruitment for us on our behalf. And basically they're using online platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I don't even know all of them because I'm not really good with those things. It's TV streaming, video game streaming, you know, that's where the kids are. So they're going to put together outreach efforts to get those youth so that they can then increase our foot traffic and also increase our WIOA youth applications. Our WIOA program is barrier-based, so they're the hardest kids to find and they're the hardest kids to serve. So they're not coming to us and we need to figure out a way to get them. So we're going to them through these avenues of social media.
What is the We Are base?
WIOA. So that's the grant that Employment and Training works under for youth services. It's the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. That's where our funds come from, 100% federal funds to execute the youth program.
Okay.
And then we have our summer youth employment program. That's OTDA funds, which is state funds that we use strictly income-based, low income, below the poverty line services, and that's our summer program. Again, they don't have to have barriers, strictly income. And that starts, you know, basically we get the funds, we run the funds through May through September. It's a 6 to 8 week summer program just to get kids in money, a paycheck, summer employment. They can be 14 years old. Hard to find kids that are 14 a job without going through our youth program. So in the past, we served a lot of older youth, you know, up to 24. They can get the jobs on their own and they can make more money than what we can offer. So I've noticed over the past couple of years, the age range for our summer youth has really been the 14 and 15-year-olds because, you know, they're harder to be able to get the jobs on their own and they're in school. So we serve them and then they're right back to school again. So that's starting. One of the changes we made to our WIOA youth policy is to increase the hourly wage. So typically we pay $13.20 right now because that's minimum wage. We want to spend money and we want to help kids have more of a, you know, living wage. So we have just passed a policy through our Workforce Development Board to pay the kids up to $15 an hour. So that's going to help us. If you can go to Dunkin' Donuts and make 16 and we want them to be a part of our program, we had to up our ante in terms of hourly wage and we were able to do that. And then the other change in our policy We used to say 90 days is what we could do. And honestly, in COVID, there were 2-3 weeks kids were missing. Kids, especially kids with barriers, often aren't going to come to work. They call in, they leave early, they disappear, and they didn't gain the work experience long enough to really make it valuable. So we've changed it from 90 days to 600 hours. So that way, if somebody wanted to work part-time and they're in college or they're in school, we don't have to cut them off. If they miss due to family issues or whatever, we can keep them in our program essentially longer by focusing on hours versus set, a set time frame. So those are our biggest changes.
Question from legislator Feeney.
Yes, I thank you. Did you say the name of the marketing firm is Purple Gator?
Purple Gator, as in purple, the color, and gator as in alligator. Yes. So Niagara County used Purple Gator. They're a much larger county and they have a lot more money than we do. But it did increase their numbers significantly. So the way our funding works, if we don't spend it, we lose it. And we can only carry over a certain amount from year to year. So we don't want to, no one ever wants to give back money, right? And our budget year is coming to an end. So by hiring this company, it helps us not fail our spending measure and essentially increases our numbers. So I'm hoping that we'll see success like Niagara County, hopefully. So yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And that pretty much sums up what I was going to share for tonight.
One resolution.
And I have a resolution. So to authorize and fill the Workforce Development Program Assistant position. It was a vacancy that we didn't fill prior to COVID and would like to fill that position. That is budgeted for. It's 100% federally funded through our WIOA grant. Money is in the budget and been approved my mod through the Workforce Development Board in terms of our grant.
Make a motion. By Shay, what's that? Sorry, yes. Second? Warcall second. Discussion on this.
Madam Chair. I'll go used to it, sorry.
That's fine.
So you said it was 100% grant funded. Is that is it a one-time thing or is it a year to year?
It's year to year.
So
yep. It is
added to the budget on a.
Yeah. Yep. It's the federal funding that has supported our program since the 70s.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Thanks for your report.
Thank you.
Okay, up next on the agenda, Danielle Zabo from CETA. I just wanted to inform the committee Danielle has left CETA. Excuse me. She is beginning work in another position outside of the county. So I know that I've been in contact with CETA. They are working through a transition plan. They're also continuing the search committee process for a new director. I'm really very close to that on the search committee. So that will be probably a lot of changes that we can introduce next month at planning. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. But they are working through their transition. And then you can see her report. If you have any questions, let me know. And I can get you the best answers that we can find. Next is Doug Kearse.
Good evening, everybody. All right, so for us at the district, we're at a very interesting time of year where we have the implementation is starting. A lot of the planning is still wrapping up and getting ready for the construction and implementation. We had a bid awarded last month, a couple bids. Hopefully are going to be awarded tomorrow for some projects that are going to be starting. The weather's starting to get pretty good. And on top of all that, it's still grant writing season. The grants are still due and coming up in early May. So a lot going on right now for us, which is good and exciting. The grants, we have different grants throughout the year. We were just awarded one that I put in my report last week, a couple weeks ago. for $25,000 on a farm that we're gonna be doing some erosion sediment controls in the Wasco Lake watershed. That funding is gonna be coupled with some other funding to get a project 100% covered for the farm. A lot of times, operations are a lot more interested to do the work when it doesn't cost them anything, and you can get a lot of work actually accomplished by pulling from a couple different grants. We got some good news from the EPF budget, the state budget that was just passed, actually. A lot of good grant programs that we applied to have either stayed the same or actually have seen increases. For example, one of them, I know a big push at the state for climate resilient farming. It just went from 4 million to 16 million. So it went up $12 million alone to try and control some of the greenhouse gases or some of the environmental air type stuff. So busy time of year. And thankfully we have pretty good staff that's already hitting the field running. So let's hope for a little drier weather. It's a lot easier and cheaper to do projects when you're not slopping through mud. But yeah, we're already out there. So we'll make it quick. And any questions that you guys have, I'm glad to answer them.
Any questions? Good. Thank you, Doug.
Excellent. Yep.
Appreciate it.
Always available.
Thank you. Next, we have Dan Welch from Cornell Cooperative.
Good evening, everyone. Just a few updates for you. I think I mentioned this maybe a couple of months ago, but we did, as of April 1st, we're now the operators of the Taste New York store that's in the Equal Rights Heritage Center downtown. So we're working through some small bumps with the paperwork, but we're getting there and looking forward to increasing the number of farmers and processors in Cayuga County that are featured there, and using that space potentially for some of our programs. Also want to mention just this past Saturday, working with County Planning Department, we did have the spring electronics collection event. We had over 400 vehicles come through, and we don't have the number of pounds, but I know we filled at least one tractor trailer completely because I saw that leave before the end of the day. So a couple more there. So that was a good thing, keeps those off the roadsides, streams and that sort of thing. Another development, and again, I touched on this briefly last month, is the highly pathogenic avian influenza. They did, at the end of March, there were 5 birds at the refuge that were found by a DEC officer and were confirmed to have that. I'm not sure, I joked a little bit about maybe they should have moved them 10 feet into Seneca County, but there are birds. So we're increasing our outreach to poultry owners and farmers on biosecurity practices and keeping their birds safe. Again, it doesn't look like there should be a shortage of any poultry, but prices are going to go up quite a bit. We've hit, as of last Friday, 22 million birds of domestic poultry in the country had to be depopulated, is a USDA term, to prevent it from spreading. So that's a problem, coupled with the global food situation, which has been exacerbated by the war in Ukraine. And then this week is the biggest week for egg consumption all year. People are buying them for dyeing. their eggs, so,
Easter.
yeah.
But to legitimize my surprise, my son's allergic to eggs, so we can't buy real eggs, so that's
Okay.
okay. I bake eggs.
Yeah. So all of that,
Wasn't thinking. Other people.
prices are gonna go up, and unfortunately, even I think across all food categories, prices are gonna continue to go up. One of the things I was surprised to learn the last couple of weeks is Ukraine is actually the second largest grain exporter in the world, or was until the war, so that has big consequences. And I think that's all I have for tonight, unless there's any questions.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Dave. No, you're sitting way up there. I wouldn't challenge it.
Dan, just one question. Yeah, the electronics, when they haul it away, where do they take it? And do we have to pay for hauling it away?
So I know they take it to Rochester is the vendor we work with, where they start taking the components apart. Steve would be the better person on the cost.
They take it to an environmental facility in the Rochester area where everything's taken apart and recycled as much as they can. We pay for them to, as a vendor, they go by the pound and by the piece on some things, Dave, and that includes everything, collecting it, recycling it, giving us the manifest, et cetera. So in a way, yes, we are paying for the hauling, but we're paying for the whole service.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Steve.
Legislator Basile Ben Ruffini, got the order I saw. Yes.
That's perfect. Wait.
In that case. Have something to say.
Whatever Madam Chair says.
I'm not getting in the middle.
I guess the question I have that was asked to me of some of the constituents is there, how they collect this stuff, is there a means to have a couple of satellite van trucks or something in some of the districts that are further north or south? 32.1 miles for me to come here one way. And just, have we tried it? It's always been here in Auburn. I was just wondering if there was, just for you to think about.
Yeah.
See if there, that wouldn't have to be a tractor trailer, maybe for our area, central location in Victory or something where some of those people could just not. Right, so we can't collect, we have a cleanup day, but we have to eliminate all the vendors, tires and computers and refrigerators.
Yeah.
Ask you to consider how that might be maybe implemented.
Yeah, we can look into that, Jim, and see if there's some opportunity.
There's a way we could deliver it, maybe. Right. We got a dump truck, we could throw them on a dump truck or something and bring them down. If like the day before we can collect and then, or something.
Yeah, we'll look into that and maybe we can work on that for the fall. There'll be a fall collection event too, so.
Question to go along with that, and maybe Steve can answer this as well. Like the local town dump days. I mean, you get your own grants for that, probably right at the town level for your
We budget for
separation.
that,
Okay.
the cleanup.
These
days.
are all excellent questions, and these are the kinds of questions that we hope, and conversations with the legislature that we hope to have as we get our new staff member come on and complete the local solid waste management plan, because these are all things that everybody's struggling with, all the town supervisors, mayors, and so on. And I think it's a good idea. Obviously, there's challenges to having very small runs with these vendors. They make their money when they have 400 cars come through.
Right, and I'm saying as the mayor in this case, how could, if it was on April 12th, April 11th, we collect and then bring it down as one.
Yeah, I mean, I think
we could help
work with
I
that.
think those municipalities could help with that, town supervisors and stuff. And just a thought if it's ever been done or considered.
We do that with the county highway department. All the stuff that they collect all during the year, they store and then they bring it early in the morning on our electronics event and kind of get it through before all the lines start. So I could work something out.
Other questions for, oh, I'm sorry. Oh.
Now that was obvious.
Well, I did not think of that to happen. I was thinking about my garage and everything.
A question about the bird issue. So if they have this disease, they can't be.
Right. There's been no documented situations where someone's gotten sick, where a human's gotten sick from bird contact, but to be on the safe side, they do not want the birds to eat.
Is anyone looking into this? Because it could end up creating some hardships, right? Where people need food, especially with the supply chain issues that we have. Is anybody investigating that and seeing, are we needlessly killing them and just destroying them rather than utilizing them for food?
I'll have to look into that. Well, you can get back to you.
All right, thank you. I don't need to give you any extra work.
No, that's a good question.
Why isn't it? Still.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Term is the
question.
Is it a state man? Who's deciding this?
Either the state, the Department of Agriculture and Markets, or the USDA Animal Plant Health Inspection Service.
I don't know how he's gonna try to fix that. I mean, if they, like, who you want him to call?
We're a great country, and New York State is amazing. And I think that we have capabilities beyond capabilities. Cornell, for example. I mean, think about that resource for the entire world, much less some small problem like this. I would guess that there are intelligent mastermind groups that could at least investigate it, given the impact and to our food sources.
I challenge the fact that if you don't get rid of those chickens, that chicken sales will drop, even though they're out in the, like, I think it'll have an adverse effect that you advocate. I don't know, to me, it seems like a bit of a waste of time.
To follow up on her question, I just want clarification from my own thoughts on this. So when they're destroyed, they're not repurposed for like food for other animals either, right? They're just completely destroyed.
Yeah.
Is that, do you know the background on that? Is that because of the mad cow disease that happened years back in the 80s where people were getting sick and things were getting worse because of that?
Well, there's two, that's part of it too, when for a disease like this where there's not a readily available treatment, USDA's kind of default is always to try to eradicate it. So
similar to burning a field down when it's infected.
Yep. And the other thing is that they have an indemnity program. So if they come in to your farm and say, we've got to depopulate your flock, we're going to pay you something for the value of those birds. And once they do that, they don't then want them.
So the farmers get some compensation for their losses.
Right. It helps the farmer get some compensation, doesn't really get to the food supply issue.
Thank you.
The eggs from these poultry, were those also destroyed?
My guess is probably anything that was still on the farm was.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Karen Cool? Tourism?
I will make it really, really quick. We have my report. There's There's a couple of things that I'll just point out really quick because they were very interesting. We hosted a fam trip from Andrea Sachs. She's from the Washington Post, and we got a really wonderful article that got posted in the Washington Post. I got a lot of movement, a lot of talk. And it was entirely about the Harriet Tubman story in Auburn, New York, which was great to see because some of the content that been trying desperately to get out there. Coming up next week, actually, we have another great fam coming through. It's from a company in the UK. They're one of the biggest tourism media outlets in Ireland. They'll be here for just an overnight. They're going through all of New York State, covering a New York State road trip, and they're trying to get underneath the story of the everyday activities going on in the state. So we were very honored that New York State chose to send them here. So I'll be hosting them next week, and hopefully we'll get to see whatever they put out in the UK, which usually we wouldn't see, but we'll hopefully get some of that, and I'll share it with you guys.
In search of the shortest parade.
And two things that we're kicking off in April, so I just thought I'd bring those over to you. It's the beginning of the fishing season, so we've been promoting a lot of spring fishing, and we have a big campaign that's going to kick off Monday. You might or might not see a lot of the content because we usually pay to push it outside of our area, of course, but there's a great publication that we put together. It talks about accessing the water in Cayuga County, the county with the biggest freshwater frontage, like we talked about. And so what's one of the questions that people ask a lot? It's like, great, we have a lot of water, but how do we get on it? So either whether it's by boat, by, going swimming and fishing and such. So there's that one. You're welcome to take it, distribute it, tell your folks about it. And the other one's the Sweet Tree Trail. The Sweet Tree Trail is also kicking off this year. It's been going on for many, many years. It is Cayuga County's farm stands, bakeries, ice cream shops, but they have to incorporate products from the area. So an ice cream shop that just, sells only Perry's that comes from somebody else, it's not included. But when they make their own and they incorporate local milk, local honey, local apples, then they're candidates for the trail. This year, because it is Harriet Tubman's bicentennial, we are dedicating it to Harriet Tubman, and a bunch of the partners have unique treats that they've created under Harriet Tubman's name. So there's been a lot of interest in the trail this year because of that extra special feature. For example, Octane Social House is having a minty mocha. Harriet Tubman's name was Minty, so it's like a minty mocha. So there's a lot of great wordplay on the items. So I'll leave that one for you as well. And I will close off with, in June, it's still coming up, we will be having our FAM trip. Prior to COVID, every year the tourism office hosted a FAM trip. A FAM trip is a familiarization trip. It is intended for frontline employees. So the waiters, the bartenders, the restaurant, the hotel, the front desk, the docents at museums and such that have direct contact with the visitor. So they get to know more of the county. So when somebody walks into their establishment, they can tell them about it. Hey, I went to this great place. It was awesome because, so they can have direct contact. We invite you guys as legislators to join us. It will be June 14th, Tuesday, June 14th. This year we'll be heading towards the southern part of the county. The last time we did it, we went up to Fairhaven. And it was a great trip. Everybody loved it, and including the love when the bus broke down. We had an incident with the bus. They had to bring a new bus, but locally we were in Cayuga at the time. And, they just whipped up some great appetizers and kept everybody entertained with an extra cup of wine, some appetizers, so nobody complained. But this year we'll be headed down towards Howland's Stone Store Museum and the Open Door Project, because they just opened it. They just finished it recently, so we want to show that off. We'll do a walking tour of the Inns of Aurora. We'll go to Long Point Winery, probably have lunch there. Amelia's Deli, if you haven't been, it's absolutely fabulous. Then we'll loop around the other side of the lake and got the other stop. We're going to go there. And then probably do Tom Thumb on the way up and get some ice cream. So you get to know some of the county. Let us know if you're interested in going. And we'll get you lined up.
Can you send us a reminder email on that?
Absolutely. That's what I want to know more about, isn't it? Yes, absolutely. We're just sending out the save the date, so I'll send you one.
Chairman Gould.
Yes, I just want to thank Karen for coming. We had a long talk in my office last week, an hour and a half, I think. And I learned a lot. I've lived here my whole life, but I learned a lot from Karen. And we talked about Millard Fillmore.
Yes.
How many people, probably 95% of people in this county do not know the president was born in our county, down in Marks, Moravia.
Mhm.
I really want that to get out to the public somehow,
It's a
because
very
that's
good
so
thing.
underused.
I think that was the stop that I said, forgot the other stop, because we'll be looping up from there. So yes, yes.
So thank you very much for entertaining me for an hour and a half.
I will follow up with an email question about broadband tourism. Any of the feedback you've ever received about it.
Okay.
All right.
Karen, you
Thank you.
give me that information that I asked
Yes.
about.
And we do have lots of information about the different areas of the county as far as tourism and visitation and everything. So if anybody ever wants to know more about their area, after now we're talking, I'm going to send them some data. So if anybody else is interested, just give me a ring.
Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Go for it.
Is now a good time?
Yes, you may.
Our wonderful county clerk has taken charge of Donate Life. And I would like to remind everybody here that if you pass and you have not already committed to being an organ donor, you cannot take it with you, no matter how hard you try. They can use many things at the kickoff event. Folks said, oh, they don't want my liver. Well, it's not just your liver we're after. There are a lot of things that you can give. You can give your corneas so that others can see. You can give your skin. One of the folks had donated part of the skin from her butt for her brother's head. And she could forevermore call him a butthead and mean it. So there are a lot of uses for everything that you have that you can't take with you. I would strongly encourage you to please think about it. And if anybody would like a pamphlet, I have some with me today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Anything else to come before the board? Motion to adjourn.
Move it. Second.
All in favor?
I say no. I didn't know where the gaps are.